Let me introduce you guys to some new MDE staff, some new names that you guys will be hearing around the office. We have a new financial and operations director. That is LaKenya Moore. We're so excited to have LaKenya, y'all. She has been fantastic with trying to handle that fiscal side, and we're excited to have her. We also have Tanya McDonald. She's our new fiscal office director, and you may recognize that name. She's previously been with the department in the Office of Federal Programs. So we're excited to have Tanya. I've worked with her on a couple of projects now, and she gets everything done, and we like when that fiscal side is taken care of. It helps us all. Like I said, I'm Ginger Kessler. I am the programmatic office director. I'm going to be helping with TA and professional development, things like that. You may recognize my name, my face. I've previously been with the Office of Special Education. I was with Dr. Tell's Bureau of Parent Engagement team for several years. I left and now I came back. So I'm excited to be back with you guys. And then we also have Natalie Long. She's a new face in our office. She is on Dr. Tell's Parent Engagement team. So she's one of the investigators. And then with parent engagement, answering the phone. So you guys may hear from Natalie. So those are some new faces or some new names that you guys might hear on our side of the aisle. So we just wanted to introduce them so that give you guys an update on where we are here at the department. So I'm going to talk to you guys about some resources that are coming out here in the next couple of months and kind of give you an update on where all of those sit. So y'all, everybody is, I'm sure, familiar with Access for All. It was a publication that came out a couple of years ago. We have developed and are ready to release Access for All 2.0. It is very similar to the previous Access for All, but we have put it in a web base. So it's a website, interactive website, kind of flipping through. It's essentially kind of like a magazine that you can flip through, your teachers can flip through and use. We've added with that, if you've ever used Access for All, the first edition, it gave you that suggestions for instruction. With this one, those suggestions for instruction have a link. So let's say it's use a graphic organizer is one of the suggestions for instruction. It's got a link right there to a graphic organizer. We've added an early childhood section, an English learner section. We've added a virtual setting section. So it's got lots of we've added a gifted section. That was a big one that was requested whenever we did training. So that one, so Access for All 2.0, I have the link. It's ready to go live as soon as we kind of do all the last visual check on it. And we're very excited for that. There is an STD webinar series that is coming out. We've recorded a couple of those episodes, and we're excited to share that resource with you guys. We also have a specially designed instructions guidance document that is coming out. We partnered with Dr. Marilyn Friend and with Dr. Bree Jimenez to bring this. Essentially, y'all, it's what makes special education special is kind of the basis for where we built the document off of. It is going to offer you guys as teachers just really good resources and really good best practices for really looking at and making sure that we're designing and providing instruction for our students with disabilities. We also have teacher resource guides for our significantly cognitive, our SCD kids, our SCD students. There's the K-8 ELA and K-8 math teacher resource guides. And y'all, I say all of this, and I probably should have started with this. We have Jenny Sanders from RCU on the call with us today. She has been we partnered. And I know if anybody just saw Sharon's screen, you just saw Bobby trip over the board in the conference room because we're all together. So that's our fun for the day is Bobby just trips live on camera. But we have Jenny Sanders. She's with RCU. RCU has been instrumental in helping us develop these resources and get them out to y'all. I want to introduce Jenny and give her a chance to kind of wave, let y'all see who she is. She's been, like I said, she's been working with us from RCU to get these resources to you guys. You will see lots of Jenny in the future. We have been so excited with RCU to be working with you. Now you can't take Bobby anywhere.
Yeah, Bobby, thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it.
I didn't even try to take him anywhere this time. We kept him at home. It's
Okay, now I said all of this to say is that you guys, these are some resources that are coming out. These are some resources that are going to be put in y'all's hands coming up. We had some funding that we needed to spend on our end. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at what our directors really need. So y'all, each district, each LEA is going to be receiving copies of the new social emotional learning standards. They are printed, bound copies. They are going to be directly mailed to you guys. I talked to the printer just last week. They were getting those all packaged up so that they can be mailed to you guys. You guys can use those as y'all see fit. If you want to distribute them to individual schools and let each teacher have a copy, there will be plenty. Y'all are getting lots of copies of those. So, and they are coming to the special education director, like they are coming to you guys. You're also going to be receiving a kit or a box from Lakeshore. These y'all are their classroom materials that go along with the social emotional learning standards that have come out. We have, we work with Reach Mississippi, and one of our pillars or one of our anchors for Reach Mississippi is social emotional learning. And with that, y'all, we said, well, okay, how can we support our teachers? What can we do? And it is a whole kit, y'all. It is, like I picture it. I have not seen a picture of it, but I picture it in my mind as like a tote, like a Rubbermaid tote. It's going to have tons of classroom materials for you guys to put in your teachers' hands for working with our students and really making sure that we're supporting that social emotional learning side of the classroom. You guys are also going to be getting packaged copies of the specially designed instruction guidance document I was just talking about before Bobby decided to trip. You guys are going to get copies of that SCD or that SDI document that we worked with Dr. Marilyn Friend on. So I said, like, all of that is coming to you guys. It'll be coming directly to you guys as the special education directors, and then you guys can kind of decide how you want to distribute it or which one of your teachers needs all of these resources in their building. Okay, so let me check the chat. I don't have a number right offhand how many, but I can look it up and I will put it in the I'll put it back in the chat. I just got to go back and look at my notes to see how many each district is receiving. Okay. I think it's Sharon's turn.
Hey guys.
Hang on. There.
Okay, are we good now? Yeah, we're good. So these are not really data updates so much as I wanted to go back over significant disproportionality and what all of that means, how it's calculated, just as a reminder. So you could have an idea of what we're talking about, because most of you have already, well, all of you have gotten your preliminary notification for significant disproportionality, but we want the official letters will be coming out, and then along with your data. So, okay, Ginger, can you skip me so I can know what I'm talking about? Hang on. Okay, what is significant disproportionality? And most of you are familiar with that. Let me move my screen so I can read. So it's really just an overrepresentation of one or more of the racial or ethnic groups in a category. It only becomes significant when the overrepresentation exceeds the defined threshold. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the current and final threshold for Mississippi is 2.0. This is the first year that we've had the 2.0 threshold. But that's when it becomes significant, and you know that your identification as significant, as having significant disproportionality, is what would cause you to be required for comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, and we'll talk about that as well. The next one. So I'm going to go over the analysis categories for you, and I see a mistake in my slide, and I'll fix it and resend it out, but The first category is identification, and that's children ages 3 to 21, not 6. Beginning July 1st, 2020, we changed it to 3 years old. That's a federal requirement. So we're looking, when we're in identification, there are several categories in identification. We look at the representation of all disabilities. So just, are we over representing our students as students with disabilities? Then autism, emotional disabilities, intellectual disabilities, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment. So those are your analysis categories for identification. The next one is placement. So we look at the placement of students ages 3 to 21. We're looking at those students that are inside a regular class less than 40% of the day. So those are your self-contained students. We're looking for each of the racial and ethnic categories. We're looking for those students that are self-contained or in special and general education less than 40% of the day. And then the other area in placement is inside separate schools and residential facilities. So they're not including homebound or hospital settings, correctional facilities, or private schools. But when the number of students that we're placing in those separate schools. And then the next analysis category is discipline, and it is ages 3 to 21 as well. So we look at out of school suspensions and expulsions of more than 10 days, out of school suspensions and expulsions of 10 days or less, in school suspensions of 10 days or less, in school suspensions of more than 10 days, and then your disciplinary removals in total. So that all of that discipline data comes out of MSIS. So, and I know Julie talked a little bit about in-school suspensions this morning and what constitutes an in-school suspension and what doesn't. We kind of talked about it just amongst ourselves, and what I would just caution you with here is if you're putting a student in school suspension, but you don't necessarily think it meets that criteria. So it's one of those situations where they're still receiving all of their services and you don't necessarily have to count it as an in-school suspension because of that. Make sure that you've got your documentation that backs that up, that student, even though he was a disciplinary action, they were still receiving all their services, because we want to make sure that that lines up. And then if you are putting students in in-school suspension, that we're recording that in MSIS correctly. So those are the 14 categories: identification, placement, and discipline. And so out of when we do those 14 categories, then we do the calculation for each of the 7 racial or ethnic groups, which means that when we're calculating significant disproportionality, that we're doing 98 calculations per district. So what states must do is select a reasonable threshold for each of the 14 measures. Our threshold is 2.0. We have to select a reasonable minimum cell size for the 14 measures. OSEP says that presumably reasonable is 10 or less. So ours is at 10. So our minimum cell size is 10. And then we have to select a reasonable minimum in size for each of the 14 measures. And OSEP says presumably reasonable is 30. So Mississippi's minimum in size for the 14 measures is 30. So you've got a risk ratio threshold of 2.0, a cell size of 10, and a in size of 30. You're good. So one of the things that we did add is a flexibility. OSEP allowed us to do that. States could choose to identify an LEA as having significant disproportionality only after the LEA exceeded the risk ratio threshold for up to 3 prior consecutive years, including the current reporting year. So we did choose to take that flexibility. So if you're familiar with your significant disproportionality reports, you know that you have to have significant disproportionality 3 years in a row. So for the identification and placement categories, we're able to use our current data. So this year, we're looking at 2021 data, 1920 data, and 1819 data to make those calculations for identification and placement. Because we have to complete a full year to get all of the discipline data, that has a little bit of a lag. So when we're looking at the 3 consecutive years for discipline, it's 1920 data, 1819 data, and 1718 data for this year. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your reports. But we did put in that flexibility where it has to be 3 consecutive years. So how do we calculate when we're looking at each of those pieces of data to make the calculations to identify significant disproportionality? Your risk ratio really is what is the specific racial or ethnic group's risk of receiving special education and related services overall and for a particular disability. What is the risk of being placed in a particular educational environment that goes back to either self-contained or separate school? Or what is their risk of experiencing a particular disciplinary removal? So each of those disciplinary categories. You put those and you compare that to the risk for all other children. So it's a little bit of a formula that you have to go through. And when you get your significant disproportionality reports, your data reports, I've put in a piece at the bottom of that report that shows you exactly how that works. But and I wish I just had I should have just gotten a big chart to put behind me so I could do it and show it for you. But so if we're talking about OSS less than 10 days for a particular racial or ethnic group. So let's just say discipline of out of school suspension of 10 days or less for the racial or ethnic group of 2 or more races. So I'm going to look at how many of my students that identified as 2 or more races had disciplinary actions of 10 days or less. And so that number is 87. I'm going to divide it by the total number of students identified as 2 or more races in the district. Then I get that risk ratio and I divide it by the total number of all other students. So I take out all my students except for my students with 2 or more races. I take them out. And I subtract that from the total number of students with disabilities that had OSS for 10 days or less. And that is divided by the total number of students with 2 or more races minus the students with 2 or more races. And that's how you get your risk ratio and you divide those 2 numbers together. So I really do need just like a big chart behind me so you can kind of see it all. But like I said, when you get those significant disproportionality data reports, I will have that in there for you so you can see that. But that's really what we're looking at with the risk ratio is just what's the specific racial or ethnic group's risk compared to the risk for all other children. So there are times that we do have to use an alternate risk ratio when we're making those calculations. When that happens, you didn't meet the minimum in size or cell size maybe for the comparison group. So your district level data will be used for the first part of the risk ratio calculation. And then if you didn't meet that minimum in size or cell size, then you compare it to state level data. And so if you are identified as having significant disproportionality and we had to compare it to state level data rather than comparing your district level data to district level data, we will let you know. And that'll be indicated in your report as well. So here's our methodology. And that says FY20, FY21, and FY2022. And this is kind of where we've been. So a couple of years ago, we kept our in size and cell size at 40 with a risk ratio of 4.0 for 3 consecutive years, and that identified about 6 districts. The next year, we lowered the risk ratio threshold to 3.0, changed our in size and cell size to 10. That was part of the federal requirements. Added that flexibility of the 3 consecutive years, including the current year, and we had approximately 45 districts. And if y'all will remember, and I'm sure you do, and you're probably banging your head against the wall right now because you've heard me say it so many times, we've kind of been letting you know that this was coming, and that we would probably see an increase in districts identified with significant disproportionality, because we've dropped this year for FY22 the risk ratio threshold to 2.0. Keeping this in size and cell size at 30 and 10, which this year it identified approximately 89 districts. So we kind of doubled our numbers there. But remember, that's that 2.0 threshold, and that it has to be for 3 consecutive years. And that's where it'll stay. You can switch it. We're keeping it at 2.0. It won't hold anymore. So can a district reserve CEIF's funds if the district has not been identified? And I think my slides got out of order, but that's okay. I think I did that. Can a district reserve CEIS funds if the district has not been identified as having significant disproportionality? And you can change it. Yes. Oh, my slides are out of order. But the answer to that question was yes. Those districts can reserve it. They can choose to reserve up to 15%. But when you do that, it has to be used just for general education students. And I'll go back and reorder this. I don't know if when I saved it, I must have done something to it. But comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, that is what, when you are identified as having significant disproportionality, you're required to set aside 15%. So if you got that preliminary notification that I sent out a couple of weeks ago, then you are required to set aside 15% of Part B and preschool IDEA funds to provide early intervening services. Those services should target the area of identified disproportionality. And these funds, if you're required, so if it's CCIS, you can use those funds for general education and special education students, as long as it's not exclusively for special education students. Okay, let's see what the next slide is.
Can I say something real
Yes,
quick,
sure.
Chair? And on this, if you recall in the past, in the IDEA funding application, the way it was set up, it required you to spend 15% budget, 15% of your Part B 611 through to 21 budget allocation, and 15% of your Part B 619 preschool budget. With the FY22 application, when it opens, if all goes well, we've got it set up for FY22 moving forward. It could be, you can mix and match it from either budget. It's just your 15% of your overall total Part B allocation, okay? So that's, we've heard from you, a lot of you did not agree with it having to be 15% of your 619 budget, because that took a large chunk of your budget. So it's just 15% of both of those allocations together. So you can mix and match it however you want to. You can pull all 15% from 611, but that's going to be for FY22 moving forward. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, new slide. Let's say, I'm sorry, y'all, they're out of order, but what does significant disproportionality mean for my FY22 budget? What we just said, that previous slide, I'm not sure how they got out of order, but when you are identified, you have to reserve that 15%. And then let's see. Okay. Now, this answer goes with the first question, which was, can I choose to set aside that money? And you can voluntarily set aside up to 15%. And if you'll remember in the past, we kind of talked a little bit about it as we were moving towards lowering that risk ratio to 2.0. that if you thought you might be identified as having significant disproportionality, that you might want to start moving some of that in there voluntarily, just so you could get used to where those funds need to be. But districts that have not been identified can set aside up to 15% of their Part B and preschool IDEA funds to provide early intervening services to at-risk students. But when you are voluntary, that can only be used for general education students. So if you're required, you can use it for gen ed and special ed. But if you are voluntary, it has to be used for gen ed students that are at risk. Okay, next slide. And I see I'm getting some questions in the chat. I can't read them yet, so I'll go back and look. So that's just a quick, like, what is significant disproportionality and how does it impact us? Districts have already received a preliminary notification letting them know, because we know everybody's starting to work on their budget. So we didn't want you to wait until MCAP's open and get in there and see that. So I sent a quick email letting you know that you've been identified and that you'll get your data reports. Official notification letters to include the data reports will be sent to districts by June 30th. And then we will also set up a series of webinars for the districts identified as having significant disproportionality. And those webinars are going to cover the self-assessments that you have to do, which includes a policy, practice, and procedure review, a root cause analysis that kind of helps us determine why that significant disproportionality exists, what's the cause of it. And that will help in creating your CCEIS plan. So that'll be a series of webinars that we're going to do. I'm going to open up my chat right now because I know we've got some questions. Okay, thank you. I thought I heard you say that 2.0 was used for FY21. The chart says that 2.0 will not be used until FY22. So last year, when we were determining whether or not significant disproportionality existed in your district, so that we would know whether or not you were CCEIS for FY21, we used a 3.0 threshold. This year, to determine CCEIS for FY22, we use the 2.0, and from now on, we're going to be using 2.0. They're getting lots of feedback. I hope that got fixed. Hold on. So if we voluntarily used the CEIS funds last year, how do we proceed now that we are required to use it? We did not use all of the 15%. So this year you would just proceed by once you get your significant disproportionality data and see what areas, what categories were identified as having significant disproportionality, you will do a root cause analysis and create a plan that addresses those areas. Now, I think that if you voluntarily set aside, and Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you voluntarily set aside the 15% and you didn't use all of it, you should just be able to do a revision in MCAPS and move that money where you need it. Yes. If it's voluntary. Yes. If you're not voluntary, you've got to use all 15%. And it's really, really best if you use it within that school year, don't let it move over into that carryover period. So if you've got that, if you're required, try to use the best practice is to use that 15% in that school year. What data was used to determine FY22? So the data that we use is for identification and placement. We use your December 1 count data for the IDEA students, and we used 2021, 19-20, and 18-19 to get our 3 consecutive years for FY22. For discipline, and then for your comparison data or your all other students, we use your enrollment data from MSIS. Now for discipline, we used, it has to have a lag because we got to finish out the whole year. I couldn't use 2021 discipline data because we hadn't finished the school year when we're making those calculations. So for discipline data, we used your discipline data for students with disabilities from MSIS, and we used, I have to stop and think, 1920, 1819, and 1718 data to make the identification and determine who was required for CCEIS. Yes, we will let you know when those webinars are open so that y'all can, if you're not required, but you'd like to attend, you may, but all of the districts that are required for CCEIS are going to have to attend those webinars. So we should know by now if we were identified. Yes, you should have received a preliminary notification. I sent all of them out. But if you're unsure, you think you may have missed the email, if you want to shoot me an email and I'll double check for you. But I sent out just a brief preliminary notification that just said you were identified. I didn't give you any of the data other than what areas you were identified in. Must the 15% for CCEIS come from FY22, or can it come from rollover funds from FY21 combined with FY22 funds? I believe it has to all come from FY22 if you were identified in that year, and Bobby's shaking his head yes. Bobby, can you repeat the information about using the full 15% from Part B instead of both preschool and Part B?
Yes, so for FY22, that begins July 1, 2021.
Bobby, you're muted. You can't hear us. Bobby.
Bobby, Sharon cut you off.
Sharon, Bobby's muted.
Hey, how you doing? I'm good.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, I didn't realize I was muted. When we all unmute, that's when we get the echo. I'm sorry. So y'all heard every bit of that great knowledge I said, and we're all good to go, right? So in FY22, the application will have a CEIS page, a separate page. It will not be inside of 611 and 619. It'll be a separate page in MCAPS in your application. It will have your total 611 allocation and your total 619 allocation. And if you're required, it'll say required there, and it will give you the amount that you're required to budget. Then you can budget that within 611, within 619, a combination of both, or just within one of those allocations. But you have to budget your full 15% that it tells you on that page. In the past, the way MCAPS was set up, it required you to do 15% only in 611 and 15% only in 619. And the feedback we got from most of you was that it took a large chunk of your parts of your 619 allocation, your preschool allocation. So after doing some research and working with our technical assistance providers, it's 15% of your total IDEA allocation. And so that's the way it'll be for next year. So you'll be able to mix it between the two or take it all from one if you want to, but it'll give you the amount that you have to budget if you're required. If you're voluntary, you can go up to that 15%, but no more.
Okay, how many years are we required to do this? So we make that identification each year. So it's annually. You will be notified if you have to do it from year to year. So this time next year, we will let you know if you're required for FY23. Okay, any other questions about disproportionately. Are we required to track these students in any way? Yes, you are required to track them. You can mark them in MSIS. There's a way to track them in MSIS, as well as we keep a tracking sheet that you have to upload in MCAPS. And I'm working with our friends at WestEd to improve that sheet for tracking the students. So when we have those webinars, we will review how to track students that you are using, those that are benefiting from those CEIS funds. So if you do a particular training, PBIS training for teachers, and then those teachers, you would track the students that those teachers implemented that PBIS training with. So we'll go over all of those different pieces and parts with y'all when we do the webinars for the required districts. So the 22 set aside is going to be measured against the 3 years prior. Sounds like we will be in this for a while to get out of the hole. So you do have to go 3 consecutive years, but if next year you're able to improve 21, 22 data, you might fall out of one, and that would pull you back out because it wouldn't be 3 consecutive years. So next year I'll be using 21, 22, 2021, and 1920 data for identification and placement. So there is a way to get out of it. And one of the things that we're going to look at with WestEd is some really solid root cause analysis and things that can be implemented to impact those early intervening services.
I guess my point, Sharon, is we have 1 year.
Okay, I think I unmuted this time. Just a quick update on this before Sharon wraps up and we move on to the next topic. The next 2 days, over the next 2 days, there will be 4 sessions, fiscal sessions. The last session on Wednesday will be on CEIS, and we will review the IDEA CEIS fiscal requirements, and we will guide the LEA staff through important concepts such as voluntary versus mandatory CEIS, and provide critical resources for planning and implementation. And at the end of that session, Wednesday afternoon, we hope that participants will be better equipped to understand CEIS, state and federal fiscal requirements, determine allowable use of funds, and respond to audit and fiscal monitoring questions. So, don't fret. There will be a fiscal session Wednesday afternoon, 1:30 to 3:30. And that 2 hours will be strictly around CEIS fiscal requirements.
I know. All of the sessions are being recorded. So if you're not able to come to the session Tuesday and Wednesday, they have been recorded and they will be made available to you. All of it will be recorded. So Rob had a question, but I think he was asking Grant. But Rob, if you've got questions about it, let me know. I'll be happy to help. Any other questions? Again, I know that's a lot of information and it's lots of information that you've heard before, but for a while, we'll probably just do a little bit of repetition here because it is very confusing. It's a lot of different calculations. And it does impact your budget. The day to include your business manager is tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow and Wednesday both are going to cover fiscal issues. So it's going to be all fiscal all day, Tuesday and Wednesday. So make sure you have your business managers with you if they're available to join Tuesday and Wednesday.
And it's actually just 4 sessions. So tomorrow 10 to 12. Then 1:30 to 3:30, then Wednesday 10 to 12, and then 1:30 to 3:30. It's 4 different sessions. They are not repeat sessions. They're 4 different sessions.
All right. Any other questions about significant disproportionality and FY22 CCEIS? I don't hear any, but as always, if you have questions about that, that you think about later, just give me a email or a call and I'll be happy to go over it with you. Be on the lookout for those official notification letters and your data reports that go along with it, as well as the webinars that are going to be there to support you as you work through this. I do not know when the recordings will be posted. It'll probably be sometime after Wednesday. We have to send them to OTSS to be converted, and then we will post them to our trainings website on the website.
Yes, I'm learning a lot about things that we post publicly on the websites. Apparently now everything must be 508 compliant. And so I can send you the PDF of the PowerPoint, which you already have that and stuff like that. But before we post it on our website, it has to go through a process to be 508 compliant. So today's information and the next 2 days, the handouts, PowerPoints, and the recordings, once they are made 508 compliant, then we'll post them on the website and also send out an email on the listserv showing where they're posted.
All right, thank you guys. I'm going to turn it back over to Ginger for our next set. And if you need anything, just let me know.
Can't hear you, Ginger.
She didn't say anything.
She talking.
Oh, I didn't hear.
I can't hear you, Ginger.
No sound.
No sound, Ginger.
Ginger, you may want to go ahead and type it in the chat.
You can't hear us either? Hold on, let me check.
Can you all hear me?
Thumbs up if you can hear Ginger talk.
Oh, I didn't hear Ginger, but I can hear you, Bobby.
Okay, now say that again, Ginger.
Okay, y'all, if Dr. Tell, are you ready?
Are you ready, Dr. Taylor?
I am, but I can barely hear you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Kessler. Good afternoon, everyone. This morning, Attorney Weathersley did a very good job talking about what we do every day. So I'll summarize the information that I was going to say earlier. But first of all, let me say I do appreciate the work that you guys do in the district for boys and girls. I know sometimes it's a daunting task because parents call and as you know, sometimes we cannot please anyone at any time, but you guys are always so amenable to us when we call. So I just want you all to know that we appreciate the work that you do, that when we receive allegations, that's what they are. They are allegations. And we look at the data to determine whether or not the district is non-compliant. So don't be afraid when a parent or when a complaint is filed. Sometimes I get calls saying, how can you stop the frivolous filing? Unfortunately, I cannot, because in law, the parent has right to file. But that's why I always say document, document, document. And so they have the right to file. And long as you document your all the things that you do, we will look at the data based on the facts and not on what he say, she say. How we look at former state complaints, we look at procedure requirements, substance requirement, and implementation. And as you know that when we look at procedural requirements, we have to determine the placement before programming. And if you go to 334 CFR 300.116, it's outlined what the placements are. So we have to ensure that you're developing and following the IEP, and it contains all the requirements. So when we look at things, we're looking at it from a procedure standpoint. So that means that procedurally, the student the district might be non-compliant, but it did not deny a student a FAPE. So that's when we look at procedural errors. Okay. The substance requirements in IEP that meet substance requirements could be considered an educational meaningful IEP. And, you know, with Andrew F. ruling clarify what a substance standards can be. And will you move the slide to substance for me, Ginger, please? So the content of the IEP, the what of the IEP development is sufficient to enable students to make progress. So that's what we're looking at. Student monitor, the student progress is monitored. The changes are made if the student progress is not adequate. So, and one of the errors we find commonly is where failing to include all of the students' education needs in the PLAF. So be very, very careful and make sure you look at the annual goals and the services. And also sometimes when we receive information, you have the related service on there, but you don't have the detailed information, how you're going to provide those services or what the students is going to receive. So look at that, because if we get a complaint saying that a student is going to get 30 minutes of language speech or PT or something else, sometimes the IEP is not detailed enough to say what the services are. If it's a life skill, it just say they can provide life skill, but it doesn't have any more detailed information in there. So when a complaint is filed, we have to call you and ask you what type of services did you provide for that said student. So when you're looking at your information, make sure it's clear enough where the complainant or the parents understand what's going on with the students at that time. You please move forward for me, please. I just had some more errors on there. And we get this all the time, or sometimes about the continuing of placement. You must look at that. You just can't say that I cannot serve him or the child is not making progress. You must adhere to the continuum of alternative placement, and you must make sure you meet the unique needs of the child, the educational needs of the student. And I cannot say enough, document. Allegations are allegations until we investigate and we ask you for all the information. And if you provide the information and you've provided the services that a parent of the complainant said that you did not, that's how we look at it. So document is very important. Move forward, please. Ginger, you may move forward. Thank you. I'm sorry. Talked about it a little bit, failing to monitor student progress. And this is a pretty regular one we get a lot of times when parents say that, well, we didn't get the progress monitoring report. We don't know what's going on, and it's in the IEP, and as you know that they should receive it. And so make progress and make sure the goals of where the student is receiving a FAPE. And as you heard Ms. Weatherly this morning, FAPE is the basis of a student with a disability. They must receive a FAPE. And so we look at that, and it's a substance error, but we do cite you for a substance errors, and sometimes we will order compensatory aid because if a child was supposed to receive a service and then not receive it, then we will order compensatory aid for that student. The next area that we look at is the implementation error. So an IEP should meet the requirements to consider a FAPE for the implementation. So the instruction service and support outlining the IEP are provided as agreed upon during the IEP meeting. When IEP changes are made, they are complete with the parent involvement. And guys, that's very crucial. Sometimes parents say that, you know, they walk into an IEP meeting and they don't really have the opportunity to involve be involved in the process, or if they ask for a copy of the information, sometimes they say they don't receive it. But as I stated earlier, all of these are allegations until we look at the documentation that you have documented, saying that you provided all this information. And I encourage that that you guys send out the prior written notice. To me, that is a great document that will give support to what you've provided, what happened in the IEP meeting, the services that you're going to provide. There's like 7 components to the prior written notice, and it explains a lot of things, the data that you use to make your decision. And if you address all of those components and the prior written notice, I promise you it will help. We can go look at that prior written notice that you provided to the parent and outline what you talked about and all the information that you explained. And that helps us a lot when we're looking at the investigation, when talking about what is a implementation, a substance or a procedure error. So it's very important that to me that you all do that prior written notice. I think that's 300.503, I believe, that talks about the prior written notice, and it gives you the component of that. So think about that. I know some school district right on the IEP, the way it's taking place, that if you address all of those components in 300.503, it will help us with the investigation. And it helps district as well when an allegation is put before them saying that you did not provide the services and you have it outlined there. So there's a nice form of documentation that you can utilize. The next slide, please. Allegation, and I just want to remind everybody that allegations are allegations until the findings and decisions are rendered. And as I stated earlier, an organization or an individual have the right to file, and you can see that on the 300.152 through 300.153. And I do understand that sometimes you have done everything that you're supposed to do, and we get adversarial individuals sometimes, however, but they still have a right to file. And we at the department cannot turn away a complaint because the allegation might be false, but that's what they are. And they could be. Individuals can file that. That means the person other than a parent may file on behalf of the student. They do not have to be a parent. An organization can file on behalf of the student. We will not send a report to those individuals unless we get consent from the parent of the student. However, they have a right to file. We get questions sometimes to say it's the aunt, it's the grandparent, or it's the neighbor. But as you all know, parent is a lot of or when you look at what parents, how the law states for a parent. But for the former state complaint purposes, an individual, a parent, an individual, or an organization has a right to file. We will send the report to the district, and we will send a redacted report without the student name or without other information, because sometimes we get systemic complaints and those complaints have other student information in there. So we're very careful with confidentiality, but it's not our practice to send individuals, or that's not the parent, the complaint, with all the necessary information in there without it being redacted. So don't get alarmed because you get an allegation. Just make sure you've documented the information, and we look at all of the information based on what you present to us. So that's why we encourage documentation. So just provide us with the information we ask for, and we will look at that, and we have a reviewing process. We do not take it lightly. We put citation there. We tell you why we cite it, if there's a citation for that. So we try our best to give you information on why we made that decision and the reason we made that decision. I believe that's it. Okay. And I've talked about that. Remember to document, 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 document. Okay. After we do the findings and decision, I work closely with my colleagues, especially Ms. Kessler, and Ms. Laney. We send all of the information over to them, and they will help you with any non-compliance issues. We provide technical assistance. So, if something occurs, we're here to support you and to help you correct any non-compliance issue that might have been issued and defined with this former state complaint. I will now open up for any questions. But let me ask Mr. Do you have anything, did I leave off anything that we should share? Okay, so I will open up for any questions. If you have any questions for me at this time. I see somebody talking, but I don't hear anything. Okay, no questions, going once, going twice. It's a wrap. Again, thank you guys for being patient with us and understanding when we contact you, when we receive a call. When we receive a call, we try to reach out to you individual and say, hey, we have got a call. Can you try to resolve this issue? So we will continue to do that. So I appreciate you all receiving my call, understanding when we call that we're not saying that you have done anything wrong. It's that we have an allegation and we're here to support you through that process. And again, we appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Hey, guys, hang on.
It's because she could hear.
Yeah. Okay, now can y'all hear me? Okay, good deal. So I think we've got Teresa Laney next, but we're gonna take a quick 15-minute break. So you have about 15 minutes. And then Teresa will come out and talk to you about some programmatic monitoring updates. So we will see you all back here at 1:45.
Hi, everyone. We are picking back up with our programmatic monitoring updates. So go ahead, just like every other session, and put your questions in the chat box. And we'll probably have time at the end to answer those questions for you. I'm going to remind you at the beginning of the presentation, and then there's a slide at the end in writing, just to remind you that we are currently in a pilot process of our monitoring, programmatic monitoring, fiscal as well. But we have our pilot going on right now, and we're getting feedback on our protocols and process. So this is going to be a really high-level overview of the new process, and just be aware that we're in the test phase right now. So we are responsible for, we have to monitor, we are required to monitor as part of general supervision. And so we implement cyclical and risk-based monitoring and hopefully improve compliance, accountability, and technical assistance. We really want to focus on data-based technical assistance and not just, we really want to look at the data and look at really dig into your systems and see what you need based on your data. So who's included in this monitoring, new monitoring system? The term local education agency, or LEA, is defined as a traditional public school district or a charter school. And so this next bullet, do not panic when you see that. It says you're responsible for compliance and oversight of out-of-district programs where you place a student. So that's the Mill Creeks and private facilities like that. But what this means is that we're going to do monitoring of those facilities through the LEAs. So when we come in to do monitoring of your district, we will ask, do you have students placed out of district? And we would like to pull the files for those students. The purpose of this and the thought process behind it is that we want you to be more connected with those out-of-district placements, and also have them in more contact with you. And so we really want the point is to get the student back into the public school district as quickly as possible. And so don't think you're going to have to monitor or have any kind of oversight over their programs. It just means we're going to monitor them through the districts that place the children. So this is our procedures and methodology. It is set up kind of like a tier system, and the universal monitoring is at the bottom of the triangle because it reaches the largest number of districts. And that includes things like your project application and MCAPs, your SPP APR data review, the annual district determinations would be a universal because these are things that every district participates in every time. It also includes dispute resolutions and then an annual risk-based assessment that we've developed as part of the pilot. Oh, go back. So the targeted cyclical monitoring will pick up a smaller group of districts every year, and we're going to have everybody on a 5-year cycle and 5-year cohorts. We are hoping to have that posted by the end of July. I hope we're still moving some districts around, and then we pulled some districts from our 1st-year cohort to do the pilot. So as soon as we get that list solidified, we will put that on the website and make sure that you know when your turn is coming up. The intensive risk-based monitoring affects even fewer districts, and that will be based on a number of factors that we will talk about in just a little bit. We'll talk about how you get identified for that risk-based assessment and what that entails. So these are the things that I just listed out for you verbally. You can go ahead and flip, Ginger. The targeted cyclical monitoring is going to start with a self-assessment, and the other monitoring activities will be based on the way that this will work is you complete the self-assessment, and then we will come back and ask you to upload a sampling of the files where we verify the self-assessment results. We are considering doing some of those in person. It's just going to depend on what we can work out with the district, but it'll be a small sampling of the files that you self-assessed to help us verify your data. This will, when I said data-informed technical assistance, this is where we get the information that will help us drive technical assistance. So when you complete your self-assessment, and we've already seen this in the pilot, that when districts complete the self-assessment, you basically identify the issues that you need to correct before we go in and look. So that's where you can look at the information that you found from your self-assessment and then request the technical assistance that you need based on your areas of weakness. The benefits of this targeted cyclical monitoring would be that the LEAs, you can be proactive in making corrections, and it may or may not require an on-site visit. Okay, just briefly, let me go over the self-assessment components. We developed it's supposed to be a quick overview of your files. Child Find has 2 standards related to policies and procedures. The least restrictive environment has 4 standards. IEP has 10. Discipline has 6. Secondary transition has 6. And early childhood has 4 right now. Well, that is a work in progress on early childhood. We will go through some examples of these standards in just a few minutes, I believe. So when you identify a sample of files for the self-assessment, we're going to allow you to select the files that you want us to review. And this is how you would determine the sample. It goes by your December 1 count of your number of students in special education district-wide. And so based on that, you would pull the number of eligible student files for the self-assessment review. We want this to be, like I said earlier, there's 6 categories that we're looking at, but you want the sample files to be a reasonable representation of your students with disabilities that are served in your district. So we would you can use one file to meet multiple criteria too. So we need students with an initial eval and placement in the past year, students who turned 3 during the past year, students who are 14 and older, and with both regular and alternate diploma tracks, students who participated in alternate assessment, if there was significant discrepancy in suspension or expulsion rates, we need one of those. Students who are suspended or expelled for 10 days or more, and so that would cover your discipline. And then if you were identified as having significant disproportionality, at least one student from each race or ethnic group and an area of disproportionality identified. And then if students are placed in an alternate setting, like I mentioned earlier, then we would want a sample of one of those files as well. You could also think about, you need to think about students from different eligibility categories and then a range of ages. And when we publish the new procedures, all this information will be in the new procedures. This is just a snapshot of the self-assessment protocol for one IEP standard. So if you look at this protocol, it is a very quick, should be a very quick review of the file. You would look at the file. We give you the record review question, and but let me just step back one step. You're going to pick a team from your district to do this self-assessment. So you want people who are knowledgeable about IEPs, and you may want principals, you may want your, maybe the SPED director is going to do it, or a case manager, but it's going to be a team of people who are familiar with the records. Was the parent afforded the opportunity to participate? So, and then we give you potential sources of documentation. So you could look at the signature page of the IEP or the invitation to the committee meeting, and then you'll just simply mark it's there or it's not. Yes, we had it. No, we didn't. And then that's their simple, just yes or no questions. And you just quickly go through the file. You will have the opportunity to go back and correct anything that you find before we come in, or to show us, tell us what the plan is, and then show us that you fix it later. You're not expected to find things and fix them before you turn in the self-assessment. This is strictly a yes or no. And then you mark the summary sheet and turn it in, and we will pull a sample from those. So my point is, don't go into the self-assessment thinking that you have to correct everything before you turn the paperwork in, because that's not always going to be possible, but it can be a daunting task, and this should be more of a self-assessment checklist process. Okay, for the cyclical monitoring, which is what everyone will participate in at some point over the next 5 years, we will have a notification of selected LEAs, and then we'll have plenty of training. So if you're missing part, this is, like I said, a really big general overview. We will have plenty of training, especially since the procedures are new. We will give you time to complete the self-assessment, probably a couple of months. Roughly, the timeline is notification in August, training in August or September, and then you have until October, November to complete the self-assessment. And then we will, once you complete the self-assessment, and this will we'll have specific dates for you as we move through into the actual process. But once you complete your self-assessment and turn in your summary form, then we will complete our monitoring activities, which consist of verifying your data and looking at, asking questions or asking for additional information if we need it, and then issue a preliminary report of findings. After that's issued, you will have 30 days to respond with either this has been corrected or this documentation wasn't in there, but we found it, just however you want to correct anything that we found. And then we will issue the final report. So that's a cyclical process. If we go into the intense risk-based monitoring, Every district every year will have their data put into the risk-based monitoring calculator, just like the fiscal. We have a fiscal risk calculator, and then we have a programmatic risk calculator. And so every year, every district's data will go into that calculator. And this process is going to include student file reviews, possibly interviews, focus groups at the district, classroom observations, policy and procedure reviews. And again, the data-informed technical assistance. So we will look at what do we find, what are the findings, and what type of technical assistance is needed in the district. The benefit of this is you pick the files, just like for the self-assessment, you will pick the files. You also have the option to do the self-assessment, but it's not required. We will then verify what we will do the file reviews. You don't necessarily have to do the self-assessment, but we have found that our pilot districts, with the feedback that we're getting, is that it's been very helpful to do the self-assessment for the districts that are in the risk-based monitoring pilot. The benefits of being in risk-based monitoring, which you wouldn't think there would be benefits into intensive risk-based monitoring, but actually you would receive high priority for technical assistance and support from the Office of Special Education. So when we determine what training is needed or what kind of supports are needed, you will go to the front of the line. So how do you get chosen for intensive monitoring? These are the categories that we currently have in the risk-based calculator. LEA accreditation status, if you're on probation, and then in the procedures, it goes into more detail about each one of these. So if you're on probation, accreditation status, you get differentiated points for were you on a probation 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You get, it's on a gradient scale. If you have schools identified for TSI or ATSI, we have looked at that data, and many of those schools, and I would say most of those schools, are in those categories because of our special education population. And so we really want to dig in and find out how to support those schools that are identified in those high need areas. Your LEA annual determination is one factor. Resolution of parent findings from parent complaints within timelines. Your performance on compliance indicators 11, 12, and 13. And then LEA correction of monitoring findings within timelines. Identification of significant disproportionality. And then the experience of the special education director in the position for 3 or fewer years. And those are, and in and of themselves, none of them are bad things, but they all create more risk for the district. So I know that the fiscal pilot was maybe a month rolled out before the programmatic. And so I know that you're familiar with how a risk assessment works, but these are areas that they could be different every year if we want to focus our attention. So just for instance, if we have indicator 13 and we have a lot of non-compliance with indicator 13, and that's causing districts to have a lower determination, then we might put more focus onto our transition. Okay. So once we go through, put all of our data in, and some of that data is data that we already collect. Some of it is data that the district supplies to OTSS or that we calculate and send out to you. But the LEAs identified with the top 10 highest risk assessment scores are required to participate in intensive monitoring, regardless of when they last participated in cyclical or other risk-based monitoring. So you will know ahead of time what the categories are for that year. And we are not going to post the risk assessment for all to see. But if you would like to see your particular scores, then we would be happy to provide that for you. So not only based on, this is not, the risk assessment's not going to be the only piece of information that we use for intensive monitoring. If your determination is need substantial intervention, that can be a factor. Notice if we get a notice from Office of Accreditation that your accreditation is at risk, or if there are emerging or emergency issues identified through either uncorrected findings, findings from the self-assessment, other available information, maybe through parent complaints or any other source of information, just under general supervision, we have the responsibility to monitor those situations as well. So the post-monitoring activities, we will have once all the data is collected and we review the files, there'll be a monitoring report, a preliminary issue within 30 days of our review. So it's either via desk audit or on-site visit. That final report will come out within 60 days. So that entire process from monitoring to the final report is about 90 days, where we make a finding, you have a chance to respond, and then we write the report based on your response. The corrective action plan, we want that to be developed with the LEA leadership to maximize its effectiveness. And so there will be some things that are required of the district in order to make you compliant, but we also really hope the self-assessment process will help you dig into your own data and see where improvements are needed. And really, we want to make that corrective action plan a joint effort between the Office of Special Education and the district. So we have some enforcement mechanisms for uncorrected findings. And remember that these are, you have a year, not more than a year, to correct the findings. And so once that final report is issued, then you will have a year to make the rest of the corrections that weren't cleared up before that. But we have several enforcement mechanisms in place in the procedures, and it varies from TA, targeted TA, maybe a monthly call, check-in call, required ed benefit reviews, or directing of IDEA funds for a certain purpose. The intensive monitoring timeline is similar. So we complete our risk assessment and then notify LEAs that they've been chosen for the intensive monitoring. There will be training for you of what to expect in the process. And then from there on out, it follows the same cycle as the same timeline as the cyclical monitoring. So really the difference is the self-assessment piece. So there's some key points to remember. If you recall at the beginning, when I first started talking, that remember that we are piloting all these new procedures. The final cohorts, protocols, and timelines have not been established yet. We have a general idea of what we want to do, but what we're hoping is that the monitoring will take place in the fall. Training and monitoring takes place in the fall. And then we will provide reports, technical assistance, and any supports that are needed in the spring or along the way to get those non-compliance issues corrected. Once a self-assessment is published online, which we're hoping to wrap up the pilot by the end of July. So once that self-assessment and all the forms are published online, you can use that at any time to self-identify areas of need and request TA. And so we've already had one of our districts, our pilot districts, say that they're going to use that self-assessment every year because they like it. And it makes you really dig into, it's a quick checklist, really kind of an IEP checklist of what we're going to be looking for. Not required, but we want to publish the entire 5-year cohort list, and then all the forms that you will need. And so you can in fact, we encourage you to be proactive about that. But the training will give you everything that you need to know before that. And we're going to train, we'll do some training for like broad training for everyone, but annually training for those districts in that cohort. And so you'll know who's in your cohort, and we'll focus in on those specific districts for training at the beginning of each school year. So I know that was a quick, like I said, a big umbrella overview, but if you have any questions, feel free to email them to we have a dedicated monitoring email. You can also email them to me at tlaney@mdek12.org. And I will be happy to answer your questions. So let me see if there are any in the chat box. Thank you, Bobby, for putting my email in there. Yeah, he's just confirming my phone number. So yeah. Which probably most of you already have it anyway, so it's fine. It's fine. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, but feel free to email them later. And I believe we're going to, Ginger, next slide. I believe we're going to give you back over an hour of your time. And so if you have any questions about anything that's happened today, just please email us at, you can go to our website and maybe find the answers to what you need. But if not, feel free to call us. That's our office number. You have email addresses for, I think, probably everyone who spoke today. And Bobby, want to drop those in there? Drop those in the chat. Sharon just added people to the listserv. Okay. And so while Bobby's dropping those email addresses in the chat, we will leave the platform open for a few minutes so you can unmute and ask questions, or drop those questions in the chat box, and we'll be here for a few more minutes.